Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Mel and I'm sure you can see behind me that there are no books on my shelves. I am doing a separate project, and while I'm doing that, I figured what better time to come to you guys with my entire unread physical adult fantasy TBR. So there are a lot of books sitting beside me. I'm going to briefly go through descriptions, but I'm not going to give you like a full synopsis because we would be here for literal years. So without further ado, I guess let's just jump into the first set of books sitting beside me. So the first book on my adult TBR is one that kind of is or isn't adult. I don't think it's really been said either way, whether this is adult fantasy or young adult, but we're going to put it in the adult category because that's where Goodreads seems to be putting it, and that is The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This is a, I believe, Arabic-inspired story about a young girl that is off to find a genie. I read part of this book and did decide to put it down for a little while, so I do intend to pick it back up at some point in the near future. Then we have The Blade Itself, Before They Were Hanged, and The Last Argument of Kings, all by Joe Abercrombie. This is the first Law trilogy, and this is a grimdark story with morally gray characters. I think it is a very character-driven fantasy, and I'm excited to get to it sometime soon. Next up, we have The Angel of the Crows by Catherine Addison. This is the same author that wrote The Goblin Imp. This is actually, I believe, an urban fantasy story, and it says it is not what you are expecting. So then we have one gifted to me by Rachel, and that is The Spine of the Dragon by Kevin J. Anderson. I don't know anything about this book. I just know that her one-liner cracked me up. When she sent it to me, she said, "Enjoy the political dragon book with empires comparing eggplants while the world ends." Sounds really good. I'm excited. I actually have book 2 on the way to me that I got secondhand, so I'm really hoping that I enjoy this one. Next up, we have Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. I've heard good things about this one. I think it's about a world where you can talk sentience into objects and make objects do different things. I think it's a really unique, different magic system, and I'm super excited to try it. Then we have another completely and totally influenced by Rachel, and that is The Green Rider by Kristen Britton. This is what she calls horse girl fantasy. It's about a young girl that one day sees a rider coming toward her. He's a messenger of the king, and before he's able to give his message to the king, he dies and she has to take it over. Then we have The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. This is, I believe, a humorous type fantasy where a thief and a knight have to team up together to save the world. Then we have Of Darkness and Light by Ryan Cahill. This is the second book in the Broken and the Bound series. It is a very reminiscent of classic fantasy dragon story. It has been inspired by The Fate and the Fallen by John Gwynne as well as Aragon, and you can definitely see the inspiration in these books. Then we have one gifted to me by Emma, and that is The Tethered Mage by Melissa Crusoe. I believe this is a fantasy world where people with magic are brought into the Falcon Army, whether they like it or not, and one young girl is trying to avoid this fate. Then we have Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is just a classic fantasy book following 2 different mages who are rivals against one another. I think it has a lot of like footnotes that are supposed to be really interesting. There is a show or movie, so I am interested to give it a try, but good grief, this is a big old book. Then we have 2 separate series by David Deglish. The first is The Bladed Fate. This involves a youngster who watched his family die, and then he decides to take up a vagrant mask and start his revenge plot. And then we also have Soul Keeper by David Deglish. This, I believe, has a lot of like magical creatures and a group of mages that were trained to fight off these creatures, but then something happens and I don't think they're really around or doing much anymore. I may have just butchered that synopsis, but I do know that it has magical creatures, and that's what made me pick it up. Next up, we have Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. This is a ragtag band of older mercenaries getting back together to save the world. I think it is a slightly humorous book, and I've heard really good things about it. Next up, we have books 1 and 3 of the Firemane Saga. I don't have book 2 yet. This is Kings of Ashes and Queen of Storms by Raymond E. Feist. I don't know anything really about these books. I know that they come highly recommended and they are political revenge high fantasy. I'm excited to get to these. Then we have books 3 and 4 of The Fate and the Fallen by John Gwynne, Ruin and Wrath. I'm reading Valor very soon, so that's why you're not seeing it on this list. I I've got to finish off this series. I'm loving them so much. Malice is a push and pull story between a chosen one that is good and a chosen one that is evil. It is political, it is war-based fantasy, and I loved every second of it. Then we have The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is a separate series focusing on Norse mythology, and I've heard excellent things about this one as well. One that I forgot because it's sitting all teeny tiny while we were back in the D's, and that is The Adamantine Palace by Stephen Dees. This is a dragon fantasy book about a world where dragons are bred and hunted for war, but political power plays are starting to come about and a dragon has gone missing. Then we have The Archive of the Forgotten by A.J. Hackwith. This is the second book in the Hell's Library. The story is about books that are able to kind of come to life. They're unfinished works, and when they come to life, if they escape the library, bad things ensue. Then we have The Flames of Mira by Clay Harmon. This is a epic fantasy story about battling between fire and ice and a war for a kingdom. Next up, we have The Dwarves by Marcus Height. This is one that I've never heard anybody talk about. I actually just happened to see it at Barnes & Noble one day and was like, ooh, that sounds good. I want that. So let me read you the back little tagline really quick. It said, for countless millennia, the dwarves of the Fifthling Kingdom have defended the stone gateway into Gilead. Many and varied foes have hurled themselves against the portal and died attempting to breach it. No man or beast has ever succeeded. Until now. I'm excited. If you've read this book, please let me know because I haven't heard anybody talk about it. Then we have an oldie but a goodie, and that is The Fool's Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which is the last trilogy in the Elderling Along series. This is a wide, expansive story following partially Fitz, but also people in different parts of the world. It has dragons, it has beast magic. It is amazing, and I love this universe, so I'm really excited to finish it off. Then we have The Dragon Lords Fool's Gold by John Holland. Again, this is one of those that I just happened to see in Barnes & Noble, thought it looked good. I'd never heard anybody talk about it, so I decided to pick it up. This is about a world where dragons rule and their taxes are really high, so a band decides to get together and steal from a dragon. I don't think it's gonna go well. Next up, we have The Crimson Script by S.J. Hull. This is an indie fantasy that was sent to me. From what I can tell, it is a political fantasy, but also takes place kind of in the slums, and I'm excited to give it a try. Next up, we have another indie fantasy, and that is Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson. This is a religious, I think, military type fantasy. I've heard some excellent things about this one. It's just really long, so that's why I haven't read it yet, but I do desperately want to get to it. Then we have The Lights of Prague by Nicole Jarvis. And I believe this is a moody historical mystery. If I'm not mistaken, it is a little bit urban, and I've never, again, heard of anybody mention this one, so when I saw it, I picked it up. The cover is absolutely gorgeous, and I want to know more about Prague. Then we have The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan. This is the third book in the Wheel of Time series. I read books 1 and 2 and kind of stalled out a little bit, so I just really desperately need to continue with the series. Next up, we have Fate of the Fallen by KAgen. I've seen some of KAgen's stuff around as an indie author, but did not realize that he also had this traditionally published novel. And this, I think, is following a prophecy and a young man who's going to save the world. I've heard okay things about it, some good, some great, some terrible, so I am excited to try it and see what all the fuss is about. Then we have Holy Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is the third book in the Book of the Ancestor trilogy, following Nona, who has many a magic, and she goes to be trained as an assassin nun. Then we have The Raven Tower by Anne Leckie. This is the fantasy from the epic sci-fi author. I believe it is about a world where gods are meddling, but men also play with the fates of gods, and then there's a pretender who must be cast down from the throne and save everything. I don't know a ton about this one. I do know that it's written in second person, and that's what's taken me so long to get to it. Then we have one that I picked up secondhand from Erin from Books and Busy, and that is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This is a very political-based fantasy that I've heard nothing but good things about. Do I know a ton of the plot? No, I don't, but I have heard excellent things, and so I'm really excited to give it a try, especially before Broken Binding puts out their new special editions, because I want to know if I want to get them. Then we have the third book in the Chorus of the Dragon series, that is Memory of Souls by Jen Lyons. I've been slowly working my way through this series since I started The Ruin of Kings last year and really enjoyed it. I don't really know how to explain this series other than it is a young man who is thrust into a world and a world of politics that he never expected, and then we flash forward many, many years later where he is a slave. It meddles with like time and ancestry. It's confusing, but in a glorious way. Then we have Kaigen of the Damned by John Mayberry. This is a horror author and his foray into fantasy. I believe it's about a man that was sworn to save the royal family or protect the royal family. He fails at this and the gods toss him down, and so he is looking for revenge on the people that destroyed his life. Then we have Dragonflight by Anne McCaffrey. This is a very classic dragon rider fantasy that I've heard inspired Aragon and many other beloved modern fantasy stories. Cassidy gave this 5 stars, so I'm really looking forward to it too. Then we have The Promise of Blood, The Crimson Script, and The Autumn Republic, all by Brian McClellan. This is the entire Powder Mage trilogy. I think it is flintlock fantasy and it has a hard magic system. My dad absolutely loved this series, so I'm really, really excited to finally give it a try. Then we have Priest of Bones by Brian McLean. I believe this is a political fantasy, but also set in like these slums where a guy is trying to protect his people after they have all of like their food and resources stripped away after a war. Then we have The Innocent Mage by Karen Miller. This is one I think about a young fisherman boy who tries to go to one of the major cities and finds his destiny and not the gold that he intended. Next up we have Cersei by Madeline Miller. This is a well-beloved Greek retelling that I'm a little bit terrified of because I'm not sure if I'm gonna like the lyrical writing style, but I do want to keep it and at least give it a try. Then we have the classic, The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Everybody knows what this is about, but the reason I haven't read it yet is because we have no idea when book 3 is coming, and I really hate to start a series kind of like the Game of Thrones when I don't know when it's gonna end. So I've got this still sitting on my shelves. It is the most beautiful of editions that I'm excited to read, but I really want to know if we're gonna continue the series before I just get myself into, you know, this cliffhanger story. Then we have 2 by Anthony Ryan, The Waking Fire and The Pariah. The Waking Fire is about dragons, if I'm not mistaken, and a weakening world. I'm excited to give this one a go. I have not read any of Anthony Ryan's stuff before, but I've heard that he has some very different styles across his different series. Then we have The Pariah by Anthony Ryan, which is a slightly different type of story about a man who was kind of raised to be a fighter, and he is under the command of a noblewoman, but she has visions of a demonic apocalypse, and he's got to survive the war and the intrigue and the politics of deadly nobles in order to survive. Then we have The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. This is the Mistborn Era 2 series. I love Mistborn. It's one of my favorite series. I've just heard this one is very, very different in tone, so that's why I've been putting it off. But it's not very long, and I just need to get on it ASAP. Next up we have this behemoth, and that's The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This one I had every intention of reading, and then it's big, and I've heard that the pacing is a little bit weird, so I just haven't picked it up yet. This is about a matriarchal society, and there are dragons. There's a new prequel coming out that is absolutely gorgeous, so I do really, really want to read this book, especially since I liked The Bone Season. Then we have Paladin Unbound by Jeffrey Spite. This is a indie fantasy about some orcs. Then we have The Wolf of Aranjaro by K.S. Villanzo. This is about the Bitch Queen who is hated by her people but is trying to unite them and protect them. I've heard that this is very angsty but also very good. Then we have The Legacy of Ash by Matthew Ward. This one came recommended to me by Cassidy, and this is an epic tale of intrigue and revolution, soldiers and assassins, ancient magic, and the eternal clash of empires. Sounds good. It's monstrous, but I do really want to try it. It sounds like the exact epic fantasy that I'm really going to enjoy. Then we have The Black Prism by Brent Weeks. This is a hard fantasy series about magic and color and how color in the prism influences magic. I've heard really good things about this book, especially for fans of Mistborn and that type of magic system, so I definitely want to give this a try. Then we have The Once and Future King by T.H. White. This is a story about Arthur and King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, which is one of my favorite things to read about. The show Merlin is like one of my favorite shows of all time. And last up we have The Thousand Deaths of Arthur Ben by Tyler Whitsides. This one I also got from Aaron from Booked and Busy, and I believe it is like a heist story about a thief who has been given a mission, and there's much more at stake than just fame and glory. I'm excited to try this one again. It's huge, but I've heard it reads really, really fast, so I just need to get on it. Okay, everybody, so I think that is all of my adult unread high fantasy. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments which ones of these that you think I should get to first. I do have a prompt on my TBR Bluff game that's like a list, a book from a list, so I will be able to randomize all of these comments and pick one when that comes up. If you just want to let me know down in the comments that you've loved a book or hated a book and think I should or shouldn't read it, I would love to know that as well. So thank you guys so very much for watching. If you want to connect with me, my Patreon is down below, as well as links to my Instagram, Goodreads, and Twitter. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you wanna, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!